Hi there, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ty if you haven't been here before, and today I'm going to be starting a part one of a two-part series on how I develop a portrait painting. Through this, I'll be taking you through my colors, mixes, how I layer, mediums, all that type of stuff. So yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Now, when one is approaching portrait painting, one might ask, where do I start? Well, in this case, I'll show you one way that I will do a portrait. It's not the only way. As an artist, I think it's good to keep things fresh and not rely too heavily on a single methodology or technique to kind of carry you through. I think it's good to experiment a little bit. But in this case, I began with a pencil drawing in graphite just on some sketching paper and worked out all the proportions, where the features are, articulating the contour of the outline, etc. Once I do that, I will then do a raw umber transfer, which I can do a separate video if that's... Leave it in the comments if you want a separate video on that. But I will transfer with raw umber and then tone in my shadow shapes by just dry brush scrubbing in some raw umber. Once you do this transfer, it should look like how my painting looks at the beginning of this video. Once you do that, then we can go ahead and start laying in some color.
Well, it's your smile when we're dancing that brings me back to who I am. When I'm old, when I'm faded, these memories will bring me back, oh, bring me back. So when I'm scared, you bring me courage, and this love is a terrifying thing. When you call me.
My main goal in this first pass is to try to establish the major form of the head and neck, I guess. Well, in this case, the major form is a egg shape, and so I'm going to try to make that happen with my flesh tone mixes. And here and there, I'll pull out some more specific information, but in general, I want to keep it as simple as possible. Also to mention, I'm using medium in my paint throughout this process, and for my underpainting, I'm using what we're going to call dead color medium. This is going to be a mixture of 2 parts mineral spirits, 1 part linseed oil, and 1 part... So there's a couple different options in that regard. You could use something like liquid, which is more of like an alkyd resin type. I go for Damar varnish because it's a little more traditional, and we know a little bit more about how it works and things like that, so that's what I prefer. Also to note, you don't want to use a ton of medium in the paint, especially when you're building up the lights, which in this case the whole face, except for the part that's in shadow, would be considered the lights. So for that, you do want to build up the paint a little bit more. You don't want to paint as thinly. Shadows, you do want to paint a little bit thinner for a nice visual effect, but also it makes things look a little bit more realistic. Alright, so now let's discuss what's on my palette. On my palette, I have, in order from, I guess, bottom left to top right, titanium white, brilliant yellow, yellow ochre pale, raw umber, burnt umber, red umber, cadmium orange, cadmium red, quinacridone red, ultramarine blue, and ivory black. As far as the brands for all of these colors, they're all Winsor & Newton except for my burnt umber and red umber, which are from Old Holland. In the center, I have my primary flesh tone mixes. I mix 4 different mixes for my skin tone and light, and then 1 general shadow color. And that's in the left column. On the right column is a pinker complexion of those same mixes, although the camera isn't picking it up as well. It looks a little bit more orange, but these are my primary mixes that I'll be using for this portrait. And what this really does is really helps speed up the process. It's a little bit more work beforehand as far as mixing and making sure you have the correct value to chroma ratio. Just a side note, in general, it should be lighter and higher chroma as it gets lighter, and darker and lower chroma as it turns away, or as the form turns away from the light. And so that's what's demonstrated in my flesh tone mixes. So my lightest flesh tone mix is higher in chroma than my lowest flesh tone mix. For my pinker complexion, I take my general skin tones and then add a mixture of cadmium red and quinacridone red in order to create a slightly pinker color, although I don't want it too pink to where it veers more into purple, which is why the cadmium red is there. It kind of balances it out. And so I'll add these to my general flesh colors in order to create the pinker complexion. Now you might ask, what is that brilliant yellow for? It's not in any of these flesh tone mixes or the pre-mixes per se, but you might have seen me using it, dipping my brush into it and using it in my strings. Well, the purpose the brilliant yellow serves is to help me raise the value if I need it without sacrificing the chroma. Titanium white notoriously reduces chroma, And in order to combat that while also being able to achieve a high value, that's why I use the brilliant yellow. Notice in spots like the cheek or even the parts of the forehead or the highlight in the nose, that is almost pure brilliant yellow on its own. And in some cases, if I even need to go lighter than the brilliant yellow, I'll do brilliant yellow in a little bit of white. Or if it's a pinker complexion tone, I'll mix the brilliant yellow and a little bit of white with a little bit of my lightest.
Closing up shop, closing up my store. I know this city doesn't need me no more. And I know it ain't no mystery. I'm going on back to Bear Country. My back is broke, my head is numb. This new generation's making me feel old and dumb. The road is dark, but I can't see. I know I'm getting close to Bear Country. The city was killing me, now I know. And it was hurting, it was taking its toll. It'll take my body, but it'll never take my soul. It'll take my body, but it'll never take my soul. Take my body, but it'll never take my soul. And I will walk till I fall to my knees, until my heart stops, until it starts to.
Now, this portrait is of my friend Jose. He is a fellow classmate of mine or former classmate of mine and a colleague. His work is also fantastic, and it's also, I find it nice to paint other artists as well. I think it's a cool thing that we all paint each other, especially those who do portraits. And so he kindly sat down for a photo, or for a portrait photo shoot. I will note though that I do not use the raw photo as it comes out of the camera. I do edit my photos a little bit, and if desired, I could do a whole separate video on how I prepare my photos for a portrait painting. But just to say, I change around some stuff with the color and the light and shadow effect, that type of thing. So in order to make a better painting overall.
Never take my soul. Take my body, but I'll never take my soul.
Now this second stage we'll call first painting, and in this stage my main goal is to pull more information out than I had in the underpainting dead color stage. In order to do that, I'm going to be creating a mosaic kind of like effect with my brush strokes, and I'm really pulling out a planar structural application in order to not only build up the paint, but also reinforce the form that I had previously established, include any anomalies that might be present. I will note as well, with an anomaly, which would be a lighter thing in a darker area or a darker thing in a lighter area, it's better to play that down in order to keep the illusion of the big form intact. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like what you saw, make sure to like and subscribe by clicking the bell and the notifications. And stay tuned for next time where I bring this painting to a complete finish. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.